What if one man's nap could terrify an entire classroom of aliens? When a human falls asleep during a live demonstration at a galactic academy, what begins as science quickly turns into panic, confusion, and an unforgettable lesson in trust. You've never seen sleep become this dramatic. If you're new here, make sure to subscribe to the channel and show a big thumbs up by liking the video now. Let's jump into the story. The interstellar morning light shimmered through the transparent dome of Caleri Academy, casting soft blue hues across the curved lecture hall. Cadets of many species, some with feathers, others with scales, a few glowing or floating, chattered in a dozen languages as they settled into their seats. The air buzzed not just with words, but with energy. Something unusual was about to happen, and every student knew it. They were gathered to witness a live demonstration, one that had never been performed inside the academy before. For the first time in the academy's long history, they would observe a human, not in recordings, not in simulations, but a real, living human being. Professor Nivax entered the room with his usual quiet stride. His 4 thin legs moved in perfect rhythm, and his second set of arms folded neatly behind his back. His face, framed by soft antennae and 2 pairs of round, intelligent eyes, scanned the audience with calm precision. Nivax belonged to the Mechari, a species known for their thoughtful teaching and calm in every situation. He stopped at the center platform and lightly tapped a glowing panel beside him. The lights dimmed. Silence fell over the room. Today, Nivax began, his voice smooth and steady. We are honored to host a species both fascinating and, to many of you, quite strange. We will be observing a human, a traveler from a death world. A collective breath filled the air. Deathworld was a term that always caused unease. It referred to planets so dangerous and unpredictable that survival seemed impossible. Earth, the home planet of humans, was one such world. Fierce weather, wild predators, sudden disasters. It was a place where danger was simply a part of life. And yet, humans not only survived there, they thrived. They built cities, launched ships into the stars, and spread their kind across galaxies. No one quite understood how. The doors at the far end of the hall slid open with a soft hiss, and in walked the guest of honor. Roan Carter, a human pilot from Earth, stepped onto the platform wearing a simple dark flight uniform and a relaxed smile. He didn't look dangerous. In fact, he looked incredibly ordinary, average height, brown hair, warm eyes, and a casual way of moving that made him seem more curious than cautious. Some of the cadets leaned forward, whispering to one another in excitement. Others sat perfectly still, unsure of what to expect. Roan waved once, then took his seat at the center chair provided for him. "Thanks for having me," he said, his voice light with humor. "Hope I don't disappoint." Professor Nivax inclined his head. "You are here as part of our advanced Xenobiology course. Today's lesson is centered on the unique physiological behaviors of your species, specifically sleep." The murmurs returned. Sleep? That was the topic? Many in the audience had read about human sleep in research data, but few had believed it. Most intelligent species across the stars did not experience sleep as humans did. Some entered meditative states, others performed energy cycles or shifted into low-activity modes for brief moments, but full unconsciousness? For hours at a time? That seemed like a recipe for disaster. Roan grinned, clearly aware of their reactions. "Yeah, sleep. We do it a lot. It's not just rest, it's survival for us." A large shell-backed cadet named Brun raised his hand. "But you become unaware of your surroundings? That makes no sense. You could be attacked." Roan nodded. "That's true, but we evolved with others around us. Someone always kept watch. Over time, we developed ways to sleep safely, shelters, guards, routines." A soft, tinkling sound came from the corner, where a silver mist hovered above a glowing disk. The sound translated into words through a translator. Do you lose control of your body during sleep? Pretty much, Roan said. Our muscles relax, our breathing slows, and our brain goes through cycles. It's like recharging a very complex battery. Some students still looked unconvinced. To them, unconsciousness was too close to death. It felt like a surrender of survival instinct, and it didn't fit into their understanding of intelligent behavior. Professor Nivax raised one of his smaller arms and tapped a new command into his console. A projection of a human brain appeared in the air, highlighting neural patterns. We will be observing Mr. Carter as he enters this state. This will allow us to monitor his physical condition and examine any responses. A round, shimmering student named Solik, who belonged to a race of energy-based beings, flickered with concern. Will he be safe? Solik asked, the colors in his form dimming slightly. Roan leaned back in the chair, crossing his arms behind his head. Safe. As I ever am. Just don't poke me too hard, yeah? The room filled with soft laughter, nervous, curious, but welcoming. Roan's calm attitude seemed to help, even as uncertainty lingered. No one in the room had ever watched a human sleep before. Would it be peaceful? Would something go wrong? There were too many unknowns. But that, after all, was the purpose of learning. As the lights dimmed further, and Roan closed his eyes, the only sound that remained was the soft hum of the Academy's air system. The cadets leaned in. The experiment had begun. The room was quiet, almost too quiet. Roan Carter sat slouched in the center chair, eyes closed, arms relaxed at his sides. His chest rose and fell slowly, evenly, in a rhythm that suggested deep rest. Around him, the lecture hall buzzed with tension, though no one dared speak above a whisper. Professor Nivax stood to one side, watching the monitors closely. Roan's heart rate, body temperature, and brain activity were all being tracked in real time. The readings were normal, perfectly within expected human sleep parameters. And yet, the stillness in the room was beginning to feel heavy. The alien cadets stared at Roan's sleeping form, their wide eyes and pulsing skin showing more confusion than understanding. For some, like Brun, the armored shell being, the idea of losing awareness made him uncomfortable. He shifted in his seat, muttering low grumbles to himself. His species didn't sleep. Instead, they went into short recovery states that kept their senses active. The concept of full-body stillness with no alertness was unnatural to him. Others shared his discomfort, though they expressed it differently. Solik, the glowing mist-like being, began flickering faster. His kind relied on light patterns to communicate, and his colors now pulsed rapidly in a warning rhythm. Professor Nivax noticed the shift in mood. Remain calm, he said softly, though his own antennae twitched slightly. We are simply observing a normal process for the human species, but it didn't feel normal to the students. Roan had been still for nearly 7 minutes now. Not a twitch, not a murmur. His limbs lay limp, and his face showed no expression at all. It was almost like looking at a statue, except the statue breathed. The cadets weren't prepared for this level of silence. Their minds, trained to detect danger, began filling in the blanks. Was he still alive? Was this what death looked like for humans? Lumira, the crystalline telepath, closed her eyes and tried to focus her thoughts toward Roan. She wasn't trying to read him, just sensed some kind of presence, some proof that his mind was still there. But the mental signal was faint and dreamlike. To her, it felt like drifting fog, hard to touch and impossible to understand. She opened her eyes slowly, her crystalline edges dimming. He is not gone, she said quietly. But he is very far away. Tarin, the small winged creature with sharp senses, flew up to a ceiling beam and perched there, claws gripping tightly. He had seen predators lie in wait like this before, motionless, silent, but Roan didn't have the look of a hunter. He looked vulnerable, and that thought was even more terrifying. Why would any species allow itself to become so exposed? A soft alarm chimed in the background, just a simple time marker, but it startled the group. Solik flared brightly, then dimmed, his color shifting into a pattern that meant confusion mixed with fear. What if he doesn't wake up? He asked, his voice produced through a nearby speaker. How do we know this is still safe? They. Question hung in the air like a fog. No one answered at first. Professor Nivax glanced at his scanner again, then at Roan. The vitals were unchanged. All signs pointed to a healthy human sleep state. But logic didn't soothe the unease building in the room. Alien minds were wired differently. They hadn't grown up with stories of naps or bedtime. They didn't sing lullabies or curl up under blankets. For most of them, staying alert was as natural as breathing. The idea of willfully choosing unconsciousness felt like madness. Brun let out a low growl. This is foolish. If a creature can fall into a state like this without protection, how did humans survive long enough to become space travelers? He pounded his fist against the side of his desk, causing a loud clang. A few students flinched. Nivax held up a calming hand. Humans develop systems. They learned to sleep in shifts, to watch over one another. Over time, they created structures. That made rest safer. Their survival depended on trust. Trust, Grun repeated, snorting. A soft idea for such a harsh world. Across the room, Lumira tilted her crystal head. Perhaps trust is not soft, she said. Perhaps it is their strongest defense. Another minute passed. Roan remained still, his chest gently rising and falling. But now, something had changed. The calmness that had once filled the room had turned into something colder. The cadets weren't just confused anymore, they were afraid. To them, Roan's quiet body no longer looked peaceful. It looked empty. Then came the spark of panic, that a low beep from the vital scanner, meant to mark a dream cycle, was misunderstood. Solik's lights exploded in a warning flare. Brun stood up. Terrain shrieked from the rafters. Lumira called out to Professor Nivax, urging him to do something. The room erupted into movement, and several students rushed forward. Some shouted. Others tried to pull up data from the consoles. One cadet ran toward the medical alert panel on the wall. Nivax's voice was lost in the noise. He tried to restore order, to explain that this was expected, that Roan was fine. But the fear had spread too far, too fast. The cadets didn't understand sleep, and now they couldn't accept it. What had started as a simple scientific observation was turning into something else entirely. A crisis, or at least it felt like one. And still, at the center of it all, Roan Carter slept completely, unaware that the quiet he had slipped into was echoing like thunder in the minds of those around him. The med bay doors slid open with a sharp hiss, and 3 emergency technicians swept into the lecture hall, their long coats trailing behind them. At the center of the room, Roan Carter remained completely still, slouched in the observation chair. A strange hush fell across the class as the glowing scans above Roan's head pulsed gently in soft blue and green. His vitals showed no danger, his heartbeat steady, his breathing even, his brain quietly shifting into deeper sleep cycles. But none of that comforted the alien cadets, who had never seen a living being fall into such complete stillness by choice. Corval, the lead medic, stepped forward first. His jade-colored skin shimmered faintly under the lights, and his 6 fingers adjusted the scanning unit attached to his wrist. As he ran the device across Roan's chest, the data streamed onto his visor. Numbers, graphs, waves, everything. Read as stable. But Corval frowned slightly, murmuring, his neural activity is very low. Professor Nivax hovered nearby, concern beginning to show in his normally calm eyes. "Low, but not abnormal for his species," he said quickly. "This is a typical part of their rest state." Corval didn't argue, but his voice was thoughtful. "If this were a Varelian or a Tesserid, I'd say this was stage 3 stasis, the kind used in long-term space travel." That quiet statement was enough to send another ripple of unease through the classroom. The cadets had studied stasis. It was a state used during critical operations, medical emergencies, or to endure decades-long space flights without aging. To think that humans entered something similar just to rest was unnerving. Brun crossed his thick arms. "You're saying humans put themselves in a state like that every single night? Just ... willingly?" "They don't see it that way." SciID Nivex, though the certainty in his voice had begun to waver. On the far side of the room, Lumira sat motionless, her crystalline form glowing faintly. Her thoughts were spinning. The earlier connection she had sensed from Roan, his drifting dream thoughts, still lingered in her memory. Something had been calling to her through those images, something strange and warm. She knew she had too. Try again. Carefully, Lumira reached out with her mind. Not to invade or read, but to feel. It was like stepping into a fog, full of soft lights and distant sounds. She saw flashes of images. A fire glowing under the stars, voices laughing quietly. In the dark, the hum of insects, the wind moving through trees. These weren't threats, they were memories. Old ones, familiar ones. The images were filled with trust. Trust in someone nearby, someone who would watch while he slept. A friend, a sibling, a team member. The message was clear. Sleep wasn't weakness. It was shared safety. Lumira opened her eyes, blinking slowly as her crystals shimmered with new light. "He's not in danger," she said gently. "He's dreaming. He's remembering something ... safe." Professor Nivax turned to her, surprised. "You reached him?" "Only a little," she replied. "Enough to understand." But many of the other cadets were not reassured. Taran zipped low over the heads of the class, his wings beating rapidly. "We should wake him, before it's too late." Corval held up a hand. There is no indication of distress. Waking him now might interrupt something important to his body. Important? Solik's misty form pulsed with bright flashes. How can being this still be important? Lumira's voice cut through the chatter. Because it's how they heal, how they process emotion, how they grow. They aren't designed like us. For humans, stillness is not danger. It's survival. Brun didn't look convinced. He stood up, pacing. If they're so advanced, why didn't they evolve beyond this? Why do they still need to lie helpless in the open? Nivax turned toward him. Maybe because not everything advanced means escape. Perhaps it means acceptance. They didn't remove vulnerability. They adapted to live with it. That statement hung in the air, heavier than anything before. The room quieted, but tension still ran just beneath the surface. Corval stepped back from Roan, lowering his scanner. Vitals remain stable. No action is required. We'll continue to monitor, but there's no reason to interfere. Nivax nodded slowly. Let him sleep. The cadets returned to their seats, though not all of them were calm. The room was filled with whispers and low conversations, each species processing the experience in its own way. Solik drifted closer to Lumira. What did his dreams feel like? He asked. Like stories, she replied softly. Old ones told near firelight, with people close by, people he trusted. Professor Nivax walked to the front of the room. Speaking again, this was not just a biological study. It became a lesson in perspective. We often think something is wrong because it's unfamiliar. But what is strange to us may be normal to another. As he spoke, Roan remained deeply asleep, unaware that a quiet storm of misunderstanding had passed around him. In the end, it wasn't science or data that helped the cadets understand. It was empathy. A willingness to believe that even something as strange as sleep could hold meaning. And still, one question lingered in the air, quietly unspoken. If humans could rest this deeply and still wake up strong, what else were they capable of that no one yet understood? A faint sigh broke the silence, followed by the smallest shift of a shoulder. Roan Carter stirred, his head turning slightly, his fingers curling as if grabbing at the edge of a fading dream. The classroom froze. Every cadet leaned forward. Even the hum of the monitors seemed to hold its breath. Slowly, Roan blinked his eyes open, squinting against the soft glow of the overhead lights. He stretched his arms above his head and yawned, completely unaware of the chaos that had unfolded while he slept. Professor Nivax exhaled, a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. The med-tech Corval glanced at his scanner one last time before quietly stepping back, satisfied that everything was still functioning exactly as it should. Roan rubbed the back of his neck and looked around at the silent room. Dozens of alien eyes stared at him, some wide with curiosity, others with disbelief. "Did I miss something?" Roan asked, a crooked smile forming on his face. "You all look like you saw a ghost." Taran, hovering in the air near the ceiling, let out a small chirp of nervous laughter. "We thought you were the ghost." Roan tilted his head. "That bad, huh?" "No," Lumar said gently, stepping forward. "Just different. You were so still. We thought something was wrong." Roan nodded slowly, starting to understand. Yeah, that's just sleep. Completely normal for humans. It's how we reset." Brun crossed his arms. "It looked like stasis. We thought you were shutting down permanently." Roan chuckled. "No, I wasn't dying. Just napping. That's kind of the point. Actually, it looks like we're off, but we're actually doing important stuff in there. Dreaming, healing, sorting through memories." The class was quiet again, but it was no longer the silence of fear. It was the quiet of thought. Something had changed in the room. The panic had passed, and now curiosity remained. Professor Nivax stepped beside Roan's chair. "Would you be willing to share what you experienced?" he asked. Roan gave a casual shrug. "Sure. Nothing wild. Just dreams about camping back on Earth. I remembered sitting by a fire with my crew after a long mission. We'd take turns staying awake while the others slept. It was simple, but it felt safe. That's what I dreamed about." The cadets exchanged glances. The idea of one individual sleeping while others kept watch was foreign to many of them. On their homeworlds, there was often no concept of nighttime rest. Energy was cycled, or awareness was constant. Trusting others with your safety while you became unconscious was more than a behavior. It was a statement of faith. Lura stepped closer. "In your dream, did you know someone was awake, watching?" Roan nodded. "Yeah, always. That's how it works for us. We sleep better knowing someone else is looking out for us. It's built into us. Even when we're alone, we imagine someone's got our back." A long silence followed his words, but it felt warm this time, thoughtful. Solik pulsed with soft, slow colors. "Maybe that's how you've survived your planet," he said. "Not in spite of your weakness, but because of how you handle it." Roan looked surprised for a moment, then smiled. "I've never heard it put like that before. But yeah, maybe you're right." Brun shifted in his seat, clearly uncomfortable. "I still think it's dangerous, but I guess it's not stupid. Thank you," Roan said with a raised eyebrow, making a few of the cadets laugh. Professor Nivax turned toward the class. Today's lesson was meant to be scientific, a biological demonstration. But what we observed became something much more valuable. Corval, standing near the edge of the room, nodded slowly. It showed us how much we still don't understand about each other, and how quickly fear fills the space where understanding should be. Roan stood up, stretching again, and looked around at the group. We've explored the stars, shared space stations, traded technology, but the real challenge isn't learning how to survive in space. It's learning how to understand each other's way of surviving. Lumira stepped forward, her voice soft. Would you be willing to stay for a while? Tell us more about how humans live. Not just sleep, but ... everything? Roan grinned. Sure, I've got plenty of stories. We're weird, but we're not boring. The cadets began to relax, many smiling now. The fear that had gripped them earlier was gone. What remained was interest, and even admiration. As the class ended, Professor Nivax made a final note in his console. Lecture complete. Outcome unexpected. Result shared wisdom. Roan stepped down from the platform, surrounded by students eager to ask questions, not just about biology, but about humanity, trust, memory, dreams, and everything in between. The back of the room, Corval glanced once more at the data recorded during Roan's sleep. A brief spike had occurred halfway through a signal, unlike any previously seen in human scans. It was subtle, like a ripple in calm water. Corval saved the file with a small smile and typed a note, possibly responding to external emotion. Hypothesis: human empathy may extend beyond waking state. No alarms were sounded. No emergency was triggered. Just a quiet, powerful moment between species, sparked by a simple human nap. And from it, something greater had awakened.